Ramsuratkumar ki
Jai.
Sarvam
Yogi Ramsuratkumar Ashram
with deep gratitude, we have already offered our pranams at the lotus feet of Bhagwan for giving us another golden opportunity to sing his powerful name in his powerful shrine. His powerful shrine is now coming into everybody's house, everybody's place. Your drawing room or wherever you are is becoming a shrine, and you are able to sing in front of him. Him who is all pervasive, all knowing, all powerful. They say that even the sound of an ant crawling is heard by God. Why? Because he is the very consciousness. He is your own consciousness in which all your thoughts appear. So now, today, we shall have a glimpse of Bhagwan in those early days, 1972, the early 70s, when Bhagwan had some haunts of his own where he would stay at definite times of the day. He was yet to come to Punetri, and that would happen only in 73, 74, 75, 76. The 3 years. For 14 years, he was only roaming the streets from one haunt to another, where he could comfortably stay. He required security, safety as well. Now, 72, December, an Englander, an English woman, only 27 years old. Her name is Diana. She had developed a problem in the back. She was a wardrobe mistress in film industry, where she had to lift heavy dresses at times. But she must have done it a little carelessly. It affected her back. And she found out there was one Dr. Chandra Sharma, a homeopathy doctor. So when she approached him in London, she saw a huge Ramana Maharishi's photo there in his room. And he said, "This is my guru. He is from Thiruvanamalai." And that is how she chose to come to Thiruvanamalai. She so much wanted to come and see and spend some time in the ashram of the sage. So when she landed in December 1972, then Thiruvanamalai was very different. She ran into friends like Wendell from USA, Kathy from Australia, and Monica, and a few others. And one day, in the evening, dusk, she found her friend Wendell and Kathy moving on to the town in search of Yogi Ramsuratkumar. She heard much about them because they were living, Wendell and Kathy were living in a place called Saraswati Nilayam, near Ramanashram of those days. They had a garden complex where she also visited at times, and there would be a talk on Yogi Ramsuratkumar, the living saint of Thiruvanamalai. And words like sinner, dirty beggar would come into their conversation, and Hayat, her present name is Hayat, given by a Sufi master. She was Diana then. So Diana began to wonder what kind of saint is he, what kind of saint who calls himself a dirty beggar, a dirty sinner. And she was curious. She joined these people, Wendell and Kathy, in search of Yogi Ramsuratkumar in the town. And they found him sitting outside a dimly lit vessel shop just outside Arunachaleshwara Mandir. Bhagwan was all smiles, and these people came. He happily welcomed them. He even had Perumal brought some teas for them. And then these people introduced Diana from England. Bhagwan said, "Is it?" She says this utterance, "Is it?" was to become very familiar to her in the following days. She found it very charming, the way he said it. He looked literally a dirty beggar with those unwashed clothes. They said he never bathed, but then many people said he smelt of sandalwood oil. He was having a bundle of peacock feathers, and he pulled out one feather from his bundle. He waved it before them very gently by way of blessing them. And then he pulled out a cigarette. She was watching him curiously, and to her surprise, he offered a cigarette to her. She was wonderstruck because she thought, how could he know? She was smoking. He knew. He seemed to know everything about them. So when he offered a cigarette to her, she took it happily and lighted it. And then Bhagwan announced, "Oh, now this beggar and Diana are going to smoke for the sake of all of you." Devotees of Bhagwan Yogi Ramsuratkumar know that Bhagwan's smoking would burn up the karmas of his devotees. It was no joy of smoking, it was the work of Father. And then Bhagwan said, "Why don't you sing a song?" Again she was surprised because she hardly sang, and if she sang at all, it was in a group. But then at his insistence, she started to sing, "My Lord is the shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. Though I walk in death's dark vale, yet I will fear no ill. Thou art with me. my God, my Lord, thy rod and staff comfort me. And when she sang, tears were streaming down her cheeks. She felt overwhelmed, getting into the essence of the song, which was accentuated by the presence of Bhagwan. There was such energy which accentuated every feeling, sharpened every feeling of her God thought. She did not know why she chose to sing this song, but then it had a great significance in view of what followed in the next few days. She was to go through an experience where the song spoke the truth of her state. Next time, after a few days, she went to see Yogi Ramsuratkumar in the town with one Monica. When they were seated, enjoying the divine atmosphere around him, for quite some time, quietly, sitting quietly and absorbing the essence of his divinity. When they thought there was enough time now spent in his presence and they wanted to go, when they were getting ready, Bhagwan said, "Look, you people, it is enough to look at the peak of this mountain." He told them, look at the peak. Look at the peak of the mountain. And then he said, it's enough to look at the peak of the mountain and meditate on it for 1 hour every day and walk around the mountain as often as you could. He was inquiring about the sadhanas that they were doing, and then he prescribed this sadhana for them. And then 2 days after, she had a dream. She says, in that dream, Yogi Ramsuratkumar appeared. He held her hand and they floated high above the world. They were floating higher and higher above the world, and then Yogi Ramsuratkumar was pointing to the world down, saying, just see how much suffering is there. See how people are suffering. The tortures they go through. See here, see there, what suffering. And then he spoke Buddha's teachings. He said, there is suffering in the world. The second teaching, there is a way out of the suffering. And the third was how to attain this state of bliss. And soon after that, the dream itself, she came down. After seeing that suffering which stayed in her mind, she dreamed. She was deep down in a hell, all hell let loose, and she was frightened. She felt the terrible suffering of the hell and was frightened. She found it very strange. But then in Thiruvanamalai, the energy of the place is very high because the whole of Thiruvanamalai is the sanctum sanctorum of the Lord Shiva. The mountain itself is considered as Lord Shiva, the linga of Shiva. And therefore the whole of Thiruvanamalai is sanctum sanctorum of Lord Shiva. In any sanctum sanctorum of any divinity, there would be a high energy. People are not generally allowed inside, especially in the south. So the energy level of this Thiruvanamalai is very high. So much so that, like I said 1 or 2 days before, a householder who lives the regular, normal life of a householder, a full-fledged householder's life, will have the energy of a sannyasi just by staying in this place. And that's why so many people from different parts of the world. You mention the country, there are people from there here living in Thiruvanamalai. Raman Bhagwan put it in the world map, drawn by his teachings, drawn by Arunachala, the mountain and its energy. People come from even nooks and corners of the world. So here it is very common that people go through visions, strange dreams. There would be some experience or the other for people who live here. Many people won't speak about it. So in the light of which it seemed okay, because she was being comforted by a Ramana devotee, that it's very common in such a place. Now on the New Year Eve, the evening of New Year, when she went to see him, when she left London for India, she took 2 cameras. One of them was Pentax, a very expensive camera, which was given to her by a friend. She did not even know how to operate it, but the friend very hastily taught her how to do it. Though of course she did not practice it enough. So when she came this time to see Yogi Ramsuratkumar Bhagwan, she so much wanted to take photos because she says his expressions are chameleonic, meaning he changed the expression in his countenance, on his face, minute to minute, from situation to situation. It changed very quickly. It was mercurial. And she was fascinated. And she so much wanted to take photos of him in different settings. But she was also afraid because she was not an expert in photographing. So she said, Swami, I would like to take photos of you if you would permit. Is it? Bhagwan asked with an impish twinkle in his eyes, and then he became quiet. And then suddenly he asked, how many will you take? Pat came the reply without thinking. She said, 108. 108? Oh, we shall see. And then the next day he said, just before he left, this beggar is often found near the railway station. He just dropped a hint and left. She took it as a hint. So the next day morning, on the New Year day, an unforgettable day for her, 1973, New Year, January 1st, she and her friend found themselves near the railway station. And then she says she missed her heartbeat when she saw Yogi Ramsuratkumar coming that way, because she didn't really think that he would oblige. She felt very, very happy. And then she was ready with her camera. She had 3 rolls of films. So when he was on his way towards them, the station master approached him, who became a friend of his. And then he prostrated before Bhagwan near the railway lines, the long lines, the iron lines of the railways. And somehow the scene melted her. Something melted inside when she looked at the uniformed station master in spotless white, prostrating before this man in the rags, this beggar in the rags, dirty rags, with unkempt hair and a strange staff of peacock's feathers in his hand. And she took a photograph. It's there. It's available to us, thanks to Diana. And after that started a stream of photos, here and there, here and there. In the beginning, she was a little nervous, but after that, she just didn't care for the technicality. She was carried away by the mood and the situation and the settings. She clicked, she went on clicking here and there. In the beginning, it was in the waterlogged rice fields near the mountain. And after some photographs, Bhagwan began to move towards the mountain Arunachala. And there, unexpectedly, he laughed. He began to laugh. And then he put his coconut shell right on his scalp. And what was more, to the delight and surprise of Diana and her friend, he started to dance. He danced and danced, but the coconut shell wouldn't budge. Very much like the Karagatam of South India. How could he dance so wildly without letting it fall? It was a surprise. Of course, she could not take photos of that. In those days, there was no video. She could only watch, fascinated by his movements. But then she did manage to click once, which is available to us. It is 2018, the souvenir. You would see many, many photos of Bhagwan, all taken by Hayat Diana. Diana was her name then, and now Hayat. And then they came across a group of farmers, their families, and they all came with such love in their eyes towards him, and they shared the little food they had very happily, very lovingly with him. Again, she had a treasure of photos of Bhagwan with those people. And finally, when she thought it was going to be over, he was not going to pose anymore. He was not posing exactly, but then everything happened well arranged by his divine grace. And finally, they all went and sat in one place, tired. And suddenly, the crows, so many crows around, they started to cry like an orchestra. And then he just looked around and smiled. And by the intensity of his energy, even the crows, one after the other, became quiet. To her wonder, all those crows which were crying out excitedly together stopped their cries one after the other, and they all became quiet. So when she thought it was all over, they came across a bicycle, and suddenly Bhagwan started to wheel the bicycle by hand. And she thought it was a beautiful sight, and she clicked again. So there's a photograph of Bhagwan standing by the side of the cycle, which you can find in this 2018 souvenir. So that day happened to be a treasured memento for her to carry with her. This enigmatic Swami should choose to give photos to her was something beyond one's imagination. It was very, very difficult to photograph in those days. He allowed it only for one or two people. And if people took without his permission, when they developed, they saw only a blank. And then the next time she went, it was on the eve of her birthday. The next day was her birthday. So she took permission from Swami to visit him on his birthday. They were all praying and hoping that Swami would come too, because when she begged him to come join them for this birthday party, he said, okay, we shall see. So the next day on her birthday, they prepared something and they started to climb up the mountain towards Kandashram, the cave there. All the time singing Yogi Ramsuratkumar Jayaguru 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 Raya. The mantra then he was giving to everybody. And suddenly she had a glimpse of him. He was coming towards them. She felt overwhelmed that Swami should choose to come. And then when he came near her, he fumbled inside the robe, inside this shawl, and pulled out 2 lotus buds, pink buds, and said, Diana, this beggar has nothing to give you except this. And there were 2 beautiful lotus buds. What was more, he offered them at her feet. He put it down at her feet, saying, this beggar's offering to Diana. She was absolutely overwhelmed. She started to cry, unable to bear this tenderness, this sweet love from this enigmatic Swami. And then they went to Sundaram cave, that is where Papa Ramdas did his tapas, this banyan tree cave. When Swami approached that, the sadhu there, Sundaramji, came out running to him. He was so happy to see Swami. They almost embraced each other and then they started to dance together again. Sundaramji was going round and round and Swami also started to dance, and both of them were dancing for quite a few minutes to the delight of everyone around. And then Sundaramji offered some teas in some cracked pots. They did not mind. She says, normally I would not have taken such tea, offered in such cups. But then with Swami, we were transported into another world where everything was divine. We could see nothing else except his own divinity. And then it was getting very, very hot up there in the mountain. The sun was blazing down and she developed a headache and she was unable to stay on anymore. And then Bhagwan said, without her telling anything, Diana has got a headache, so this beggar will take leave of her. The next day, she says, she was in delirium. She had developed very high temperature and she was crying out in pain. She was screaming in pain. Even the breathing was getting to be difficult. And her friends were alarmed. They ran to Dr. Hugo, who came immediately and began his treatment of her. She was rolling in agony, drifting in and out of consciousness. And then Katie, her friend, began to attend to her. She kept a photograph of Ramana Maharishi by her side and started to chant Yogi Ramsuratkumar Jayaguru 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 Raya. And suddenly she felt that she came out of her body, went up there, and from up there she was looking down at her form, at her body down there. And she saw these two friends helping out, and the doctor seated there. Her own body was lying down. It was an out-of-the-body experience for her. And what was more, Katie began to sing the song that she sang in front of Yogi Ramsuratkumar that day. A very strange song that should come to them at this time because it was a death experience for her. She nearly went out of her body completely. So when Katie began to sing the song, she saw from up there Yogi Ramsuratkumar's image coming near her, and then it became one with Raman Maharishi's figure, and there was a golden beauty in the whole image. Both of them became one. Ramana Bhagwan and Yogi Ramsuratkumar became one, and the face was shining gold. And then she found returning to her body. And she started to breathe again, and life came back to her. That is when her friend Katie said, and Wendell, they said that when she was there in delirium, she raised both her hands and was crying out to the world. She was telling Yogi Ramsuratkumar and Raman Maharishi, there is so much suffering in the world, there is so much suffering you have taken upon yourself. Please hand it over to me. Let me go through the suffering so that the world be free. It was as though Sri Raman Bhagwan and Yogi Ramsuratkumar Swami reflecting their thoughts, their work, taking the suffering of the world upon themselves. And she was begging them to hand over that suffering to her. And she went through a near-death experience after that. It's all very mystic, strange, and very significant. She found her experience with Yogi Ramsuratkumar was unforgettable. She went back to London, preserved all these photographs, began to distribute many of them to people. She says, unfortunately, she could not find those negatives when we asked for them for our centenary celebrations. Still, we managed to get many of them. Thanks to Hayat Diana, we have such wonderful, wonderful photographs. We cannot even imagine the beauty, the kind of life he lived there. Now that Bhagwan is here, right in front of us. We shall submit our today's prayers at his feet. Bhagwan, we seek your immediate divine intervention